The Jubilee Sovereign. On Jubilee Day, the Ramsbottoms asked all their relations to tea, including young Albert's grandmother, and look at how party was she. She'd seen Queen Victoria's Jubilee and her wedding to Albert the Good, but she got a bit upset when young Albert asked her how she'd gone on in the flood. She cast quite a damper on party, but cheered up a bit after tea and give Albert a real golden sovereign that she'd saved since the last Jubilee. It had a picture of Queen on the one side and a dragon fight on the reverse. It tasted of camphor and cobwebs for being so long in a purse. Albert cuddled the coin and he kissed it, and he felt the rough edge with his tongue. But he knew by the look of his father it wouldn't be his very long. "Shall I get you your money box, Albert?" said mother, so coaxing and sweet that Albert let drop an expression he must have picked up in the street. "I'll show you a trick with that sovereign," said Pa, who were hovering near. So he took it, pretended to eat it, and brought it back out of his ear. This magic filled Albert with wonder, and 'fore you could say Uncle Dick, he'd got the coin back from his father and performed the first part of the trick. When they saw as he'd swallowed the sovereign, with excitement his relatives burned. Why, each one suggested some process for getting the money returned. Now some were for fishing with tweezers, and some were for shaking it out. If they only got back a few shillings, they said it'd be better than a note. They tried holding Albert head downwards and giving his back a good thump, but his uncle, who worked for a chemist, said there's naught for it but stomach pump. They hadn't a stomach pump handy, so Pa did the best as he could with a bicycle pump as he'd borrowed, but that weren't an ha'porth of good. At the finish they sent for the doctor, who looked down his throat through a glass. He said, "It'll mean operation. I'm afraid that he'll have to have gas." "How much is this here gonna cost us?" said father, beginning to squirm. Said the doctor, "It comes quite expensive. The gas will be 8p a therm. Then there's my time, 4 shillings an hour. I can't do this thing in 2 ticks. By right I should charge you a guinea, but I'll do it for 18 6. "What? 18 6 to get sovereign?" said father. "That doesn't sound sense. I tell you what, you'd best keep our Albert and give me thod 18p. The doctor concurred this arrangement, and to this day remains in some doubt as to whether he's in 18 shilling or whether he's 18p out. But what happened to Albert Ramsbottom after he got swallowed by a lion? You've heard how young Albert Ramsbottom in the zoo up at Blackpool one year, with a stick with an horse's head handle, gave a lion a poke in the ear. The name of the lion was Wallace, and the poke in the ear made him wild. And before you could say Bob's your uncle, he'd up and he'd swallowed the child. He was sorry the moment he'd done it. With children he'd allus been chums, and besides he'd no teeth in his noddle, so he couldn't chew Albert on gums. He could feel the lad moving inside him as he lay on his bed of dried ferns. And it might have been little lad's birthday. He wished him such happy returns. But Albert kept kicking and fighting till Wallace arose feeling bad and felt it were time he started to stage a comeback for the lad. So with his head down in a corner, on his front paws he started to walk, and he coughed and he sneezed and he gargled till Albert shot out like a cork. Old Wallace felt better directly, and his figure once more became lean. But the only difference with Albert was his face and his hands were quite clean. Meanwhile, Mr. and Mrs. Ramsbottom had gone home to tea feeling blue. Ma says, "I feel down in the mouth like," and Pa says, "I bet Albert does too." Said Ma, "It just goes for to show you that the future is never revealed. If I thought we were going to lose him, I'd have not had his boots soled and heeled." "Let's look at the bright side," said Father. "What can't be helped must be endured. Every cloud has a silvery lining, and we did have young Albert insured." A knock at the door came that moment, as Father these kind words did speak. 'Twas man from Prudential who'd called, for they had tuppence per person per week. When Father saw who had been knocking, he laughed, and he kept laughing so that the young man said, "What's there to laugh at?" Pa said, "You'll laugh and all when you know." "Excuse him for laughing," said Mother, "but really things happen so strange. Our Albert's been et by a lion. You've got to pay us for a change," said the young fella from the Prudential. "Now, come, let's understand this. You don't mean to say that you've lost him?" Ma says, "Oh no, we know where he is." When the young man had heard all the details, a bag from his pocket he drew, and he paid 'em with interest and bonus the sum of £9 4 and 2. Pa had scarce got his hand on the money when a face at the window they see, and Mother says, "Hey, look, it's Albert," and Father says, "Aye, it would be." Young Albert came in all excited and started his story to give, and Pa says, "I'll never trust lions again, no, not as long as I live." The young fella from the Prudential to pick up the money began, and Father says, "Hey, just a moment, don't be in a hurry, young man." Then giving young Albert a shilling, he said, "Pop off back to the zoo. Here's your stick with the horse's head handle. Go and see what the tigers can do." Runcorn Ferry. On the banks of the Mersey, over on Cheshire side, lies Runcorn, that's best known to fame. By transport a bridge as takes folks o'er its stream, or else brings them back across same. In days afore transport a bridge were put up, a ferry boat lay in the slip, and old Ted the boatman would row folks across at per tuppence per person per trip. Now Runcorn lay over on one side at stream, and Widnes on t'other side stood, and as nobody wanted to go either place, Well, trade it weren't any too good. One evening, to Ted's superlative surprise, 3 customers came into view. And Mr. and Mrs. Ramsbottom it were, and Albert, their little son too. "How much for the 3?" Mr. Ramsbottom asked, as his hand to his pocket did dip. Ted said, "Same for 3 as it would be for 1, per 2pence, per person, per trip." "You're not charging 2pence for that little lad?" said Mother, her eyes flashing wild. "Per 2pence, per person, per trip," answered Ted. "Per woman, per man, or per child." "5pence for 3, that's the most that I'll pay," said Father. "Don't waste time in talk." "Per 2pence, per person, per trip," answered Ted. "And them as can't pay has to walk." "We can walk and all," said Father. "Come, Mother, it's none so deep, weather's quite mild." So into the water the 3 of them stepped, the father, the mother, the child. The further they paddled, the deeper it got, but they wouldn't give in once begun. In the spirit that's made Lancashire what she is, they'd sooner be drowned than done. Very soon the old people were up to their necks, and the little lad clean out of sight. Said Father, "Where's Albert?" And Mother replied, "I've got hold of his hand, he's all right." 'Twere just at that moment Pa got an idea, and floundering back to old Ted, he said, "We've walked that way. Come, take us rest for half price. That's a penny a head." But Ted wasn't standing for none of that there, a making an obstinate lip. "Per 2pence, per person, per trip," Ted replied. "Per trip or per part of per trip?" "All right then," said Father, "let me take the boat, and I'll pick up the others halfway. I'll row 'em across, and I'll bring the boat back, and 3pence in bargain I'll pay." 'Twere money for nothing. Ted answered right-o, and Father got hold of the sculls. With the sharp end at boat towards middle at stream, he were there in a couple of pulls. He got Mother out, it were rather a job. With the water she weighed 1/2 ton. Then pushing the oar down the side of the boat, started fishing around for his son. When poor little Albert came up to the top, his collar was soggy and limp, and with holding his breath at the bottom so long, his face was as red as a shrimp. Pa took him across, and he brought the boat back, and he said to old Ted on the slip, "Wilt row me across by myself?" Ted said, "Aye, at per 2pence, per person, per trip." When they got to the side, Father laughed fit to bust. He'd got best at bargain, you see. He'd worked it all out, and he'd got his own way, and he paid nobbut 5pence for 3. Thank you.